Ava, look!
I cannot believe this.
Is that your boyfriend? 야, 빨리 좀 와. 어머, oh my god, look at them. 야, 네 남친 맞지? 맞다니까.
This was an essay I had worked on. Well, it started as an essay and then I made it more into like a video script. But I've wanted to talk about this for a while, and I'm not good at just memorizing stuff and speaking freely, so I'm gonna be looking at my screen most of the time. But yeah, I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone by recording and speaking about this topic. And there's gonna be a really long introduction to it, but yeah, I'll just start. So surveillance technology and K-pop are not two subjects that might seem initially related, but have significantly more in common when viewing music videos, concept photos, and celebrity life in general. And if you're already a K-pop fan, you could likely make a few guesses about where the connections lie. I could talk about obsessive stan culture, parasocial dynamics, the use of certain apps to have artists and fan communication like Bubble, Weavers, the now dead V app, or long dead V app, I should say, fan site photography. There are so many different things that I could talk about, but I want to speak specifically about certain K-pop concepts and music videos and the way that different forms of technology and surveillance are shown in them, and how this imagery can be tied into what a lot of people have already coined as the aestheticization of surveillance. So much of what I see both online and in my daily life already has to do with growing concerns about technology use and rapid technological advancements and problems with social media. These have been issues I've known and heard about for pretty much my entire life, or a large part of it, and I am part of early Gen Z, so I grew up online. I know about these issues. I don't think it's as bad as with people younger than me, like iPad babies, but it's still pretty bad. I do want to say I don't want to reduce any of these concerns to any particular generation, however you choose to make distinctions between them, because I don't think it's any one generation's fault. These sort of discussions around the harms of rapid technological advancements, the media, surveillance, all of these have existed for longer than I've been alive, and probably since like the dawn of the Industrial Revolution or Gutenberg's invention of the printing press. Like, these are really old issues. There's so much that could be discussed with so little time and the limits of my current knowledge, so I'm focusing on specific patterns that I've noticed within some music videos. Showing cameras, phones, digital media, surveillance, and so on are not at all new in K-pop or global media. There are several examples of similar imagery shown in Western music videos and film or TV. There's The Truman Show, Person of Interest, several reality TV shows, and those are just to name a few examples. But there are a few K-pop specific examples that sparked my interest in initially talking about this, and the groups aespa and New Jeans especially made me want to think about the connections between surveillance imagery and K-pop. But there will be clips or other artists shown. I don't know how I'm gonna edit it, but other groups will be briefly shown. And when watching music videos for different groups, along with looking at conceptual videos and short films, concept photos, all of this, I noticed a few patterns that, when considering real-life concerns about social media and surveillance, made me want to relate these groups to certain cultural theories, sociological theories. One may say that K-pop is not that deep. I disagree entirely, and nothing exists in a vacuum. These companies, directors, and all others working behind the scenes are working in a world that is rapidly changing technologically, and everyone is growing increasingly concerned or related by these changes. Pop culture also responds and comments on these changes and trends, not just academics or the news or regular people like me. So the culture is shaped by these changes and vice versa. Fans and wider audiences are living in a world with these issues and also seeing related imagery in the media. The groups that I'll mention have more lore and stories behind their concepts and music videos, but I want to focus a little less on that and more about the imagery present that I picked up on. I also wanted to give a few disclaimers. I can't analyze or mention every single example that relates to surveillance tech or imagery or social media, any of that, because that would be way too much, and honestly, I don't pay attention to too many groups in general for me to be able to do that. I don't even pay attention that much to K-pop anymore, as I did like when I was younger. So there will be things missing. I'm not the only one who has talked about what I'll present, and I may mention some of the same theories or intellectuals as others, and I don't think that can be helped because there's no way I can discuss media without mentioning names like Marshall McLuhan, for example. And also, I'm by no means an expert in anything. I am a complete amateur. This is a rudimentary introduction to the topics and not meant to give a complex understanding of any of the theories or ideas that I mention. It's possible I'll get things incorrect or misuse a theoretical concept or miss something important, and for that I apologize, but this is more of just me pushing myself to talk about something I'm interested in, and also a start for me to further explore and learn about these concepts. Also, for the sake of some structural clarity, I've decided to think about everything through 3 connected categories: self-actualization / sense of identity and self-surveillance. The other category is mutual / peer surveillance, and then finally state and societal surveillance. And when brainstorming the script, I kind of thought of it as a triangle. I don't know which inversion of the triangle I want it to be, but I'm separating it by size and the scale of the subject, of course, with the individual being like the smallest, and then a little bigger is just like direct community, and then largest, of course, is society. And I think there will be a lot of overlap between these categories when I talk about my examples, but like just keep those categories in mind. They all make up this triangle of surveillance. The reason why I want to also talk about self-actualization and one's sense of self when it comes to these forms of surveillance is because social media and the digital world more broadly have become so integral to people's identities and self-development. This makes sense because many people, myself included, grew up online. The internet was a gateway for exploring my interests, learning more about them, developing my style, and it was a big part of my various phases. Unless the internet shuts down worldwide, I don't think it's going away, and we're going to have to grapple with social media and the consequences of its use. Despite all the issues there are, people still post online, look at what others post for establishing their identity and communicating with others, and those other people include both those they know in real life or strangers who are far away. Obviously, people also use social media for entertainment, education, and so on. These are not inherently bad. I don't think anything I've mentioned is like bad usage of the internet, but all of these things can be used for harmful things. I think like no technologies are inherently bad. It's just that people who have the capacity for evil are what make it potentially harmful. Surveillance tech, as I will discuss, often has good intentions, and on the surface, it looks like a positive, so we buy into it, we contribute to it, but it's also used for horrible things, further subjugating us. These newer technologies and the internet affect us, our thinking, our perceptions, and our sense of self. Marshall McLuhan speaks of how technological developments shape us too, not just us shaping and creating tech. People create surveillance technologies, and in turn, all aspects of ourselves are affected too because we are being surveilled. This is why I'll focus a lot on self-actualization. We, as the users of the tech and the recipients, we're all part of it. Many K-pop videos tell stories of people in their youth discovering themselves. There are a lot of coming-of-age stories in individual videos and over the progression of multiple videos by many groups. Phones, computers, cameras, and social media are frequent counterparts here. They're necessary props as part of the storytelling and the process of self-actualization. It would be a fantasy to ignore the pervasiveness of these in our daily life, so naturally they're also seen a lot in these videos. In the case of a regular music video or film, show, play, etc., you can suspend your disbelief in aspects of the story and technicalities. You can watch engrossed in the story and whatever is being shown, forgetting that there's a camera, script, acting involved, and so on. The better the acting and the directing, the more believable it is. The less likely you are to think about the fact that it's all scripted. Only with behind-the-scenes footage and interviews would you actively think about these things, unless you're someone who's watching to analyze the editing or framework. For example, in that case, you would already be purposefully placing yourself out of the work that the media was attempting to draw you into. I think that the showing of cameras and phones, especially if they're directed towards the screen, reveal what is usually hidden, reminding the audience of their existence as spectators, tearing apart the fiction. You're forced to see and acknowledge the camera, and the way you view it changes based on what's being captured. The notion of point of view is everything here, given how it shapes the gaze narrative. You must actively think about what it is in the story that's being captured on screen. If you as the spectator are being acknowledged, then why? What are you supposed to see being recorded or photographed? The illusion that allows you to consume fiction is broken. And excuse me if I mispronounce his name, but film critic and theorist André Bazin said that cinema sought to give the spectator a near-perfect illusion of reality within the limits of the cinematic narrative and technique. It is realism achieved through artifice. This is a purposeful illusion that the spectator gets lost in. Things like fourth wall breaks are meant to pull one out of the illusion. I think fourth wall breaks were once a little more novel and exciting and maybe slightly more effective, but are now a bit more ubiquitous. Over time, spectators have become increasingly more involved in media to the point of being almost like characters. Addressing and including the audience is much more common, especially with social media and streaming. I say all this because I want to address how there are several forms of voyeurism and exhibitionism present in the media. You're watching characters and real-life people being watched. Sometimes it looks like they're watching you too. Sometimes you and the characters are not only watching videos, photos, or phones shown on screen, but phones and cameras are also watching you and the characters. It's a weird, jumbled up, intricate web of self-surveillance, surveillance of others, and eventually state surveillance, which I will get to. In Zoe Hitzig's article On the Grid for the Drift magazine, she discusses how widespread data collection has become since the days of the old internet. Rather than this data collection primarily happening in the home within certain hours of the day when using a desktop, data collection is now constant with phones, security cameras, smartwatches, devices that constantly listen like Amazon's Alexa or the Google Assistant, and so on. Likewise, the internet is no longer a separate space. I've seen many people online lament the fact that the internet isn't the same as what it was in their childhood, a clunky shared desktop in one corner of the house that was used only during specific hours of the day. Now it's fully integrated into our lives. School, work, politics, everything. The internet is the real world. It affects the real physical world as much as the real world affects it. They have become intertwined to the point of no separation, in the way that a turtle might grow into a piece of plastic and become permanently shaped by that. We offer up our information voluntarily for the use of apps, websites, products, and services. Some other popular examples of this would be Real and location sharing apps like Find My Friends or Life 360, or location sharing features within apps like Instagram and Snapchat. Hitzig describes this as a form of Stockholm Syndrome. We love these tools and we show love through sharing locations. It's keeping track of friends, family, and romantic partners under the guise of safety. Your loved ones can see you, and that's comforting enough to ignore that big tech and the government also see you. It's now very common and normalized, and it's called digital intimacy. You can track where everyone is and what everyone is doing, just like The Sims. It can create FOMO and potentially cause drama by revealing who's with who's lying, who's cheating. To not share one's location is seen as hiding something. It erodes trust and the ability to have secrets, which, by the way, are a normal part of the human experience. There's no more privacy in our highly digitized age, even if one doesn't use tech. It's not exactly possible to be off the grid anymore. I think this example is already dated by the time I'm making this video, but the T app and the Facebook page Are We Dating the Same Guy are very similar, and they're used to evaluate potential partners, see what red flags there are, and to see who's cheating. It's all surveillance. Now, this was all for the sake of helping women finding the right partners and seeing who's cheating, and I don't like cheating, but the whole concept of the app makes me wonder, is finding out this information worth all the other privacy concerns involved for both users and those posted on the app? Where will it lead to? Not only is there manufactured consent leading to people's willingness to give up their private information, but people are also sharing other people's information. With good intentions, it's still a slippery slope. These platforms are also taking the place that real people would have had before, such as friends and family. You're getting your gossip from something like the T app or anywhere on the internet when you used to maybe get this information just through your community. These would be conversations to have more privately with your friends. But on the internet, smaller conversations can blow up outside of the intended audience, and everything is visible to everyone. Big tech is standing in to give community when traditional ways to build community were already there for all of history. But what's different is the convenience and scale. There's also a degree of anonymity and distance online, which grants a feeling of safety, but that anonymity is still not fully there. The era of internet safety that I and many others grew up on, where we were told not to share our real names, faces, and information online, is long gone. People will post the most incriminating things possible with their face and full name on display. Nowadays, hiding that information make you seem more suspicious, like you have something to hide. And I think this is partly because of how intertwined the internet and real life have become. There are people who will say that if you have nothing to hide, then you're fine, but I don't think this sentiment alleviates any of the concerns. It's a slow, gradual acceptance of digital surveillance and policing, and it could become more dangerous, especially with developments in AI allowing for data to be used to generalize and predict who will do what. It's part of digital spying that goes far beyond being used by companies to better advertise to potential customers. Data is captured and used by AI for surveillance and policing, such as with Palantir. I think the music video for ETA by New Jeans is a prime example of this topic concerning seemingly innocent forms of surveilling others that could lead to negative consequences. Again, the intentions are good, but it makes me think of real-life concerns surrounding any kind of mutual surveillance and recording of people in public. In the video, the members are at a party waiting for their friend Eva to arrive. She's still on her way and a bit late. The members see her boyfriend talking to another girl, they call her to let her know, and are constantly trying to update her and record evidence of him cheating. Also, I think it's necessary to mention that the music video was part of their partnership with Apple, and the entirety is filmed on an iPhone, meant to show how good the camera quality is. I don't know. I think there are layers here, is what I'm trying to say. The members record evidence, and as Eva rushes there, she's imagining the worst case scenarios in her head, and it's a little unclear if some of those fears are actually true, but it does seem mostly true based on what the members record, like the boyfriend and girl sneaking off to a more secluded area. So it's a song and video about New Jeans letting a friend know that their boyfriend is unloyal. I think this is clear. And yes, the intentions are good, and if I were in this situation, I would probably do the same thing to let my friends know. But I want to shift this to another related issue. Not about catching cheaters specifically, but the concept of taking photos and recording others in public for any reason. There is little privacy nowadays. Even if you're not directly being recorded, there's a possibility of showing up in the background of someone else's photo or video, and you have little control over that and what happens. You can't control where it's uploaded and its reception. Not only is your data getting tracked through using your phone and computer through these apps and websites, security cams, the government, but other people are also contributing to this tracking and embracing it by how they post themselves and others. Or, taking photos and recording other people and themselves in public, which end up online. It's only getting increasingly more possible to do this without letting anyone know that they're being recorded. It's one thing for there to be security cameras everywhere and for there to be cameras on phones, but it's another thing for there to be inventions like the Meta AI glasses, which have a camera and microphone embedded into the glasses, allowing wearers to record people without their knowledge, also collecting their data. Everything seen and heard becomes a data point. And a few different glasses brands are actually making their own smart glasses, and there are celebrity ads and endorsements which are encouraging people to hop on the trend to get this next new desirable thing, even though it's, I think, a social net negative. Back in July of 2025, Tyler the Creator dropped his album Don't Tap the Glass and went to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it to make a post about the listening party, and this post struck me as relevant to this topic. He wrote, "I asked some friends why they don't dance in public, and some said it's because of the fear of being filmed. I thought, damn, a natural form of expression and certain connection they have with music is now a ghost. It made me wonder how much of our human spirit got killed because of this fear of being a meme, all for having a good time." With everything becoming data and content, it's no surprise that people have developed a fear of being perceived and surveilled. Sure, in the past, before the invention of smartphones, there were still cameras and you'd still be seen dancing and having a good time, possibly embarrassing yourself in these social spaces, but it was probably mostly left to the confines of those spaces. Everything was in the moment and would remain in the past within your memory and the memory of others and, those near you. But now everything can be recorded. Everything lives on past the present moment in a way unlike before. There isn't that same sense of privacy. Your whole life can change from a photo or video that quickly spreads for the better or worse. Of course, people are so reluctant to express themselves in ways you'd see people express themselves in the past. The copies of real life, seen and recorded through the phone, are what dictate how people choose to present and act in reality. The image has become what matters more than the original. Going back to Hitzig's article, she also mentions the sociologist Erving Goffman. In his book, The Presentation of the Self in Everyday Life, he introduced the idea of social dramaturgy, meaning that social life resembles theater. He said that people are social actors who tailor their performances to their contexts, such as audience, time, location, and so on. There are multiple factors that influence how a person will behave and present socially to leave a certain impression, meaning that people are also made up of multiple selves, and that there is fluidity between these identities. But there has been a contextual collapse to a degree. Social media speaks to everyone in our lives the same way. This is more so the case if you have everyone following one account, but it's more common that people have different accounts and different platforms with different audiences. But I think the case still stands. We also maximize engagement and desired results by presenting different selves on different platforms and accounts, presenting extreme caricatures at times for maximized results and interactions, and we do this with specific audiences in mind. The online persona is highly curated, even when one is trying to present a more raw and unfiltered self. The music video for Noir by Sunmi does a really great job of showing this by Sunmi constantly recording herself in dangerous situations for her audience and staging scenes to seem more glamorous. The versions of you presented on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, dating apps, any sort of platform, they're all different, even if all still technically presenting you. Out of all other K-pop groups, I think aespa's lore is the most relevant when it comes to this topic of self-presentation on social media and how it links to self-actualization and broader surveillance. All of this will probably make more sense if you're already familiar with aespa's concept and videos, but I'll still try to explain a little bit. In the first episode of the SM Cultural Universe, we're introduced to what I is and where it comes from. In the sci-fi world of aespa, there's a digital existence called I that coexists with the real world self. It seems like everyone who's online has an I self whose essence is an amalgamation of the information they share. Because I's are only based on this digital data, they're inherently different from who they're based on, because the way people present themselves online is always altered and fragmented. Online presentation doesn't grasp the full reality and essence of what a real person is. Personal data from social media, and I assume online databases, forms into this digital self, but in the group's lore, it somehow transcends the real world and digital world, as Giselle's professor states in the news in one scene. I is not merely digital, but an entirely new form of existence that the world has never seen before. It is simultaneously oneself and not oneself. The I self can be ignored by some, but others try to interact, such as the aespa members who all use them for different things in their daily lives. But what happens when an individual is left to mean nothing more than a pile of information or data that can be reproduced? One student in Giselle's class brings up the obvious concern as a follow-up to this topic. Yes, our data is being used to create different versions of ourselves, but our data isn't us. The data used by I is the best version of ourselves that we present to the world. And of course, this isn't always the case. There are plenty of examples of people presenting the worst versions of themselves online, but for a majority of people, it tends to be a bit more polished. Then we move on to the next question of hacking. Not only is data being used to form new selves, but this entire plane of I existence is susceptible to glitching and hacking, and the I selves can also act on their own, going rogue, and potentially becoming malevolent. aespa's lore involves them attempting to deal with all the strange glitching phenomena and how it severed the ability to communicate with I. And I won't go into too much detail on what happens for the rest of their storyline, but in the following episodes and in the plot, they get help from an entity named Nevis, and she helps them to travel to a place called Kwangya, described as an ever-changing space of infinite data and energy. And they do this by leaving their bodies in the physical world and synchronizing their minds to their I selves. It's like two minds in one virtual body, while before there was at least a little more separation between the two selves. Then later there is further exploration into the dark sides of social media. Rumors, hate comments, deepfakes, and the list can go on. It's not just the negative aspects of social media, but also the existence of a perfect digital self. There's one scene where Karina confronts her hacked I, and she responds with, "I am you." This I self is the perfect version of Karina that she wants to be based on her curated posting. People's lives online tend to seem perfect and glamorous even if they're not. People, being living creatures, also get old, fall ill, and eventually die. Meanwhile, eyes are timeless. I think that eyes are the dream of transhumanist tech bros who wish to transcend the limits of the human body and mind through technology. Karina is given the brief opportunity to delete her eye and clear her social media, but with Nevis's guidance, she doesn't. Their solution isn't to get rid of I, but just to fix whatever is causing them to be evil, which aka is the Black Mamba virus, which is the name of their debut song. And I have to bring him up again, but I think the father of media studies, Marshall McLuhan, would liken all of this to the Greek myth of Narcissus. In Understanding Media, he says that the point of the myth is that men at once become fascinated by any extension of themselves in any material other than themselves. Digital selves, while just fragmented extensions of people, become objects of idolatry. These extensions are valued more than who they're based on. All this information is a bit less clear in the more recent videos and songs, but with Supernova and Armageddon, the members are shown merging into these new super beings, a mix of themselves and their eyes, but on an even greater scale than before. The events of Armageddon show the end of the world and the birthing of new creations caused by Nevis helping Espa. There's a blending of Kwangya and the real physical world, foreshadowed by the music video for Spicy. These I versions seem to have taken over, completely changing the members. There is an increasing inability to tell who's human and who's not, as shown with the facial recognition tracking and struggling to identify them in the music video. The I selves have more knowledge, consciousness, and autonomy. The simulations become what is real. In the most literal sense, this is hyper-reality, as Jean Baudrillard would put it. The presence of their eyes and a lot of the original aspects of the lore are less obvious now than they were in the past, and I think this is for both stylistic purposes and because a lot of it was already explained in the SM Cultural Universe episodes, but these concepts are still present and have bigger implications. All of this reflects current concerns about AI and its growing usage. Even the videos for Armageddon and Lemonade use AI-generated imagery, and a while back, I don't remember when, Nevis debuted as a virtual idol, and I think it also had an AI-generated voice in collaboration with LG's generative AI program. This all connects to how AI bots and generated content have filled all corners of the internet. People have becoming over-reliant on AI like ChatGPT or Claude to do things for them. Everyday technologies like phones have made us into cyborgs. Our bodies themselves are attached to the new organ of the phone. It's like a separate eye, and in the case of smart glasses, they are literally new eyes. Our selfhoods have been filtered through these technologies and social media, and it's hard to imagine a world without using any of these newer technologies. Cultural theorist Paul Virilio speaks of virtual technology and an increasingly sedentary lifestyle and disappearing space, leading to growing indifference to the physical world and real people. The current cybernetic dimensions of life also result in a lessening sense of free will because people have become elements in the feedback loop of algorithms. On a somewhat lesser scale compared to Espa, I think groups like Artemis and New Jeans also cover these warped senses of self related to technology and surveillance. Both music videos for Ditto portray some of the surveillance imagery, with the video cam being the central character in the video. Ditto relates to the topic of self-actualization through its representation of fandom culture, parasocial relationships, and the sense of belonging they bring. But as shown towards the end of side A and the entirety of side B, this is illusory. There's a way in which these recordings manipulate and warp both perceptions and memories. What Ban Hee-soo, the protagonist, sees and remembers isn't exactly what happens, but the tapes still give her those same rosy feelings. I'm not going to do an in-depth overview of the story, although there are some interesting videos out there already explaining everything. I want to focus a bit more on the video for OMG, which Ditto transitions to. OMG is an interesting video because of its increased levels of self-awareness and how it shows the struggles of one's sense of self under a stronger source of surveillance power under a state institution. While Ditto portrays what it means to be a fan, OMG uses the setting of a psychiatric hospital to portray what it means to be an idol under the scrutiny of others. The video is meta-cinematic. All of the members are playing both them as New Jeans and as characters in the story, patients in a mental institution, and the video shows the delusions that each of them have. Hani thinks she's an iPhone, Minji thinks she's actually a doctor there, Hayden thinks she's a cat, and Hain thinks she's the main character in a series of fairy tales. Danielle is the only one without delusions. She's self-aware enough to know that she's in a music video and a member of New Jeans, aware of the reality beyond the story of the video. And then it turns out that the doctor shown in the beginning isn't even a doctor but a fellow patient who sees New Jeans as multiple different groups of people. I suppose meant to hint at all the different narratives that people create about them. The members are all different in the minds of the public. This might be somewhat of a stretch on my end, but I wanted to connect the contents of this video with Michel Foucault. I thought that there were a lot of things that reminded me of the concept of the panopticon and Foucault's ideas in his book Discipline and Punish regarding the distribution of power in state institutions. The panopticon was originally created by Jeremy Bentham, devised as a way to get prison inmates to surveil themselves. These inmates had no knowledge of when they were being watched by the prison guards, so their behaviors would change under the fear of getting caught. They became their own prison guards through self-regulation. Surveillance is an integral part of power here. For example, previously during plagues and epidemics, it was necessary to surveil, document, classify, and segment people. This was disciplining and controlling individual bodies for the sake of keeping contagions under control. Power and governance over people in this regard makes sense, and it's for a good reason, but not without further applications to the rest of society. Foucault outlined how these disciplinary practices extended beyond dealing with the plague, but also controlling dangerous, undesirable, or sick people elsewhere at medical hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, penitentiaries, even schools and workplaces. At these places, authorities decide who is good or bad, mad or sane, dangerous or safe, normal or abnormal. This is decided and regulated through knowing where people are, knowing who the patients are, understanding their characters and personalities, and being able to recognize them for the sake of surveilling. Foucault said the panopticon should not just be understood as a dream building, but as a diagram of the mechanism of power reduced to its ideal form. It's a form of political technology that must be detached from any specific use. State institutions and surveillance have multiple uses and applications outside of only surveilling people and collecting data. Hospitals heal patients, schools teach children, prisons are supposed to keep dangerous people away from society, theoretically, and so on. All of these other uses make it so that power is distributed throughout all aspects of life without one clear central power, also making it nearly impossible to detangle oneself from the panoptic world, especially as these forms of thinking become absorbed into the social body of the public. People increasingly self-surveil and surveil others around them. Are idols not also under the scrupulous watch of the company, fans, and general public? They too are surveilled and expected to make changes and improvements based on what is observed from their performance and appearance, something that the video for OMG was hinting at. In his book Psychopolitics, byung-chul discusses a similar thing. The internet grants the illusion of freedom and mobility, but social media is just a digital version of the panopticon. If anything, it's more extreme than Bentham's version. Online, people willingly expose themselves and participate in the digital panopticon's operations. People can post any information about themselves without any idea of who knows what and what is seen, or when anything is seen. Part of the quiet and discreet power of technology is that, unlike with disciplinary power, people now subordinate themselves on their own free volition and for their pleasure and benefit. Big data uses this information to turn people into objects that can be better quantified and measured. The behavior of people is better predicted, and it's also easier to steer people in certain directions. Biopolitics uses population statistics to administrate and regulate, but this population data is unable to tap into the psyches of people. Big data gets this deeper information based on the data that people willingly give online. Instead of biopolitics, there is psychopolitics. Under neoliberalism, there is a turn away from the body and instead to the mind. The mind has a productive force through information and programs. Digital surveillance is different from Bentham's original idea because this newer form of surveillance does not have the blind spots of the analog system. In Bentham's panopticon, the prisoners could still have secret desires and thoughts. There was no way for those aspects to be seen or known. But now in the digital age, big data is aware of one's thoughts and wishes. It has full surveillance over you, what you do online, what you look at, everything. All the data gathered can infer information about you that not even you would be consciously aware of. If everything can be tracked and measured, then everything can be known. It is the age of purely data-driven knowledge. And this actually was reminding me of this story I heard like a really long time ago of Walmart being able to know that someone's daughter was she was a teenager, I'm pretty sure it was like a teen pregnancy. Walmart knew that she was pregnant just based off things that she was buying. So this is the power of data. And while there is online censorship, Han argues that the current society of information is not about destroying words, but multiplying them to no end. Constant posting and an overload of information and transparency. People are voluntarily transparent with the feeling of personal freedom and without the feeling of being surveilled. Lately, some of this is involuntarily, with some websites requiring users to submit their IDs under the guise of internet safety. There are also more and more ways to tie people's identities to what is posted and seen online. To wrap up this section, a video like OMG is meant to be a reflection on New Jeans' idols and how they are perceived by the public and by fans. But there are some connections to general surveillance and the regulation of people. With all of the examples shown, it's definitely not obviously connected to the theories and ideas I mentioned, and I don't think they were intentionally meant to be commentary on surveillance or technology. But based on the current political and social climate, I think there are connections to be made, and these topics just interest me. Surveillance imagery is everywhere and aestheticized. Aspects of it are accepted and embraced. Other parts are rebelled against. I can't say whether or not rebelling really works because sometimes the image of subversion fails to actually counter anything, but this is also easier said than done when there is barely any escape from surveillance technologies. I think the pervasiveness of this kind of imagery is only inevitable. Like I said earlier on, modern people are dependent on the same technologies that surveil us, and we often derive our sense of self through the digital world. In the case of K-pop, this aestheticization is frequent, especially with 4th and 5th gen groups, undoubtedly because of how prevalent surveillance tech is in the life of modern people, I mean to say, especially in the 2020s. It ties to every aspect of life, from self-identity, relationships, and larger institutions. I guess I'm left with the final question of whether or not this prevalence of surveillance imagery is a positive thing. It could be used as a critique of the current climate. It could leave viewers like me to further ponder the implications of surveillance tech and the lack of privacy we have, or it could be used as a justification for these forms of technology. Or maybe most people who like K-pop are not thinking about any of these things when watching the videos, and I'm pushing the limits of what meanings can be extracted from them. I'm not sure the answer to any of these, questions I'm coming up with, but I am sure that people should be thinking more about the implications of various technologies, like its use in our daily lives, and the potential negative consequences of what's presented as convenient or positive.